Bye. Yep, that's worked. It's recorded
Hey,
now.
happy days. All right, here we go. Welcome to the Law Be With You podcast show, which is on Christian Fandom Geek. We're live streaming. This is a new venture for the show. Omar, you're one of the major collaborators on the show, a
Yep.
font of knowledge, a guru of cosmic wizardry in comic books and law and canon.
Yeah,
Okay.
well,
We've just had the Star Wars episode on the Anchor podcast, which was an absolutely awesome conversation. And now we're going to be talking about the Green Lantern. And so, before we go into the Green Lantern a second, what got you into comic books in the first place? And we have spoken about this before, but we're going to talk about that again because it's a really awesome story.
yeah, well, I didn't know what it was called at the time, but I was a Fanderson. Only years later, I found out that was what that was. But I was a massive fan of Jerry Anderson's TV shows, the puppet ones.
Yeah.
So Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet, Stingray. And from there, as a child, these were obviously reruns in the early 90s. I saw that you could get the comics and stuff like that. And a friend of mine, this is at primary school, he every Monday, he used to get, his parents used to get the Sunday Times. And they used to have a section for kids called the Fun Day Times. And it used to have a clipping of Thunderbirds. It was like a Thunderbird comic strip.
Awesome.
And I started to read those and really got into it. And then they actually started to do, I think it was every fortnight, they used to have a Thunderbird comic. I think it was about 30p or something like that. That was like part of my pocket money. So been collecting comics since then, really.
Very nice. Thunderbirds are awesome as well. I remember those. I was into those as well. Okay, so now, so we know that I know that you're a big comic book guy. You're into canon. You love various comic book franchises from Marvel and DC. But I know one very close to your heart is the Green Lantern.
Yeah.
For those, there'll be guys and gals that are watching this show that don't know much about the Green Lantern mythos. So, what is the history of the Green Lantern? I know that might be a big question. So, just gonna kind of condense that down. Like, what is a little sort of bit to know that you need to know about the Green Lantern history of the comic book?
Okay. If we're going to talk about just main continuity, just to keep it
Not
same.
multiverse storylines.
yes. But the second iteration, which is the iteration of the Green Lantern concept, is kind of the one that everyone knows kind of now, which is kind of the whole idea of that Green Lantern is not a superhero in itself, but it's a title. It's actually a corps. It's actually thousands of Green Lanterns all over the universe that serve to protect their particular sector. So they're essentially space cops, but their power comes from the emotional spectrum, and they're part of where their power is rooted in is will, is to overcome fear and to have the will to do something. So the stories are always based around that. So it's so there has been runs where it's been like a police procedural, where it's like more kind of solve a case, but then you have more outlandish things that can happen, and then you've got the power ring, which basically can create any constructs that the bearer actually wants, as long as they've got the willpower to do it. They do have to recharge their ring, so that also adds an element where they could do something massive, but that can be at the cost of how much power they've got left in their ring. So that adds the element of kind of danger, where they could be a Green Lantern could be fighting a massive villain, and only
Yeah.
has 10% of any power left in their ring, and they have to defend it. They have to defend it before the ring runs out, and they haven't had time to recharge.
So how does it? Because obviously, think about obviously Green Lanterns and the Lanterns in general are part of the DC landscape. So they're in the same universe as Batman and Superman
Yeah,
and Wonder Woman and the Flash, etc. Obviously, with Superman, I'm a big Superman fan.
yeah,
Superman recharges from the yellow sun. How
yeah.
does the Lantern recharge their ring?
They well, the home planet of the Green Lanterns is Oa,
Yeah, yeah,
where there's these blue kind of aliens. They're kind of like they're like the guardians, and they're the ones that imbue the power to all the Green Lanterns. And on that planet, there is what's called the central battery, and
yeah,
that's where the source of all the Green Lanterns' power is. And basically, each lantern has a ring or a kind of a version of the ring, and
yeah.
then they have a battery, their own lantern, which they have to kind of use to recharge, and then they say the Green Lantern oath to recharge their battery, their ring.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Okay, that's cool. Okay, so we've talked about the Green Lanterns. There are other color lanterns now. This can be a bit of a tricky, for folks who don't really know much about the lore of the lanterns. So,
Yeah,
briefly, what I know there's the yellow ones and there's blue ones. What are the different lanterns, and obviously associated with the different color are different attributes and powers. So, what is that?
yeah. So yes, this was a recent thing. This happened about 10 years ago or so, when Jeff Johns took over as the main writer of Green Lantern. He which actually comes from an idea that comes from the 80s um, from what's his name, the guy who created Watchmen.
Oh
um,
gosh, I'm not a Watchmen fan, so I only know about the Zack Schneider version of Watchmen.
yeah, my mind's just gone crazy now. I can't remember his name now.
You remember though?
I know
You
it's going to
remember?
really annoy me in a moment. But yeah, so he did a short story where it was called like the Twilight of the Lanterns, where he brought this idea that there was actually different types of lantern,
Yeah.
and that was expanded in Jeff Johns' run of Green Lantern in the late 2000s. So you have eight different lantern cores that you have. You have the Green Lanterns that are powered by will, as I was saying. You have
Yeah.
the Sinestro core, that's the yellow lanterns. They're powered by fear. You have the red lanterns that are powered by rage. You have the blue lanterns powered by hope. You have the violet lanterns that are powered by love.
Oh wow.
And the the violet tribe. Oh gosh, I can't remember which one that one was. That was just escaped me. Then you have the black lanterns. They are death. And then you have the white lantern, which is life, which is basically only been one lantern has ever been a white lantern. And basically he took all the rings from each of the other lantern cores to create the white lantern. He's also my favorite Green Lantern too, which is Carl Rayner.
Okay. Oh, tell us a little bit about that one then. That's interesting.
Well, it's a bit like Doctor Who, isn't it? Your favorite Doctor Who is your first one.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah.
like when I first started to read Green Lantern in the 90s, Carl Reiner was the Green Lantern at the time.
Yeah.
So he's always been my personal favorite lantern.
Yeah.
He, for me, it kind of reflected a lot like who I'm like, kind of like I've always kind of liked to draw and write and stuff like that.
Creative, very creative.
Yeah, so he was a graphic designer and was into anime and stuff like that. So his constructs were a lot different to the other lanterns. It
Mm.
was more complicated. He would make like, Gundam robots and mechs and stuff as constructs that he could create out of his Green Lantern ring. So
Oh wow.
I've always enjoyed that about him. So yeah,
Mm.
so that's what kind of why he's one of my favorites. And yeah, he did become the embodiment of all the lanterns and became the White Lantern for a time.
Brilliant. That's awesome. Um, Now, another lantern and that is really, really famous, and we have had a chat about this before as well, is John Stewart.
Yeah.
Tell us about him and why he's such an important character within not only Green Lantern as a comic book, but within the sort of genre of comic books and fandom in general.
Well, John Stewart as a Green Lantern was actually the first black superhero that DC ever had.
Hmm.
He also was, he took the mantle off a white character and and kind of took that forward. It's quite interesting, the history of not just him as a character, but how his character was created and how he what was the kind of political kind of
Yeah,
idea at the time.
yeah.
Um, at the time, this was in the early 70s. Green Lantern wasn't actually doing well as a
Mm,
comic book. It wasn't selling well.
mm.
Also, the Green Arrow wasn't either. So what they did was that they put them together. So
Okay.
Green Lantern and Green Arrow had their own comic book that they kind of co-starred in. And
Wow.
and one of the writers, which is the guy who created John Stewart, Denny O'Neil, he wanted to use Green Lantern and Green Arrow as an allegory for different political views.
Mm,
So Green Arrow has always been known as quite a liberal character and always
mm,
has kind of a liberal view on superheroing, while Green Lantern, Hal Jordan,
mm.
Green Lantern, he was always known as more of a conservative.
Okay.
So they actually had a storyline where they were having a road trip across America where they were tackling things, but seeing both sides of the kind of political spectrum. And there's a very famous comic book. There's two famous comic books in that run. There's number one where Speedy, which is Green Arrow's sidekick,
Mm.
he gets it's a whole storyline about him actually being hooked on heroin.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
yeah,
Whoa.
which was it was very a seminal comic book because
That's out there. That is
yeah,
really out there.
it was like one of the first anti-drug kind of comic books.
Mm,
So that was one thing, but there was another one where it's a very famous scene where Green Lantern sees this black woman, and
mm.
this black woman says to him, "You save blue people, yellow people, all these aliens all over the world, all over the galaxy, but you don't save black people." This is
What?
in the 70s, and it and that moment, Hal Jordan, like he was shocked at this black woman saying it. So you can see where Danny O'Neill's like kind of head was at. And
Mm,
I read an interview with him where he was like, they were talking about actually like kind of replacing Hal Jordan for a bit as the Green Lantern.
yeah.
And he said it wasn't even a political idea of bringing in a character like John Stewart, a black character. He just said it just made sense. Like,
Mm,
well, especially when the way that they were kind of pushing the whole idea of the Green Lantern and Green Arrow and kind of using that as an allegory for the politics
mm.
of the day. He said
Yeah.
that it just made sense that would be the successor to Hal Jordan at the time. So
Mm.
that's how DC got their first black hero.
So that's a really powerful thing. And I'm glad you said that, Omar. So when you get like some groups now, because obviously there's a lot of talk of Henry Cavill being replaced potentially in the new Superman film that J.J. Abrams is directing and
Yeah,
writing, I think, as well, or maybe co-writing. And there's talk of a black Superman and race bending the character now. there's been a bit of a, kind of outcry by some of the groups that are in fandom that are saying, well, why are you race bending Superman? Henry Cavill's a great Superman. Now, I'm a Henry Cavill fan. I think you like Henry Cavill as well. So there's no issue from us with Henry Cavill. And especially as a Brit as well, we love having a Brit as Superman. That is like, we're British guys, so we want a British man as Superman 100%. But in terms of the concept of race bending and whatnot, you're really stating a case that actually, when you look at something like the Green Lantern and whatnot, you see that identity politics plays out in comic books. So when, say, a group like Geeks and Gamers might complain about them having identity politics and changing things around, you're basically saying this is part of the history of comic books.
Yes.
That it's part of the franchise.
Yeah. It has been. We've, as I said, we have John Stewart as a Green Lantern in the 70s. We have James Rhodey, who's now War Machine, but he took over as Iron Man. I mean, even like, Thor was taken over by Beta Ray Bill and also Jane Foster. So that's like gender bending. I mean, even Loki, not just going into race, but Loki has been a woman.
No way.
Yeah, there has been a time when Odin turned him into a woman. So like these things, like all these characters are malleable. Like it doesn't really change things. And I mean, there has been characters, I think we've spoken before. There are different universes where Superman is black.
Yeah. So it's not something ad hoc. It's not just a kind of contrivance just for the sake of, I mean, maybe the way that they're doing it at DC now, I don't know how they're going to do it, how they're going to play it out. But from the law and from the canon, you can make a strong case that actually it's very coherent to the narrative that you get in comic books. They do push boundaries, they do change characters around, and actually it is part of the paradigm. It's not just a kind of new modern fad.
No,
necessarily.
It's not.
Yeah, I hear what you.
I mean, if you look at the X-Men, I mean, the X-Men originally were 5 white teenagers. And then in 1974, when John Sayre's X-Men came out, they changed the X-Men fundamentally to characters from all over the world. I mean, if that happened now, I'm sure that there would be elements of fandom that were saying that it's just playing to identity politics. But it actually turned to a franchise that was the most popular franchise for over 20 years.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying. There is this sort of thing within the fandom of, oh no, not identity politics, because I guess we've kind of spoken about this on the podcast. To be fair, it's played out in Star Wars, for example, in a way that hasn't always been great.
Yeah.
And so when they're seeing it in Superman or Green Lantern or any kind of thing like that, there's a kind of like, oh, not identity politics again. And people have different views of identity politics. I think we both 100% agree in diversity, and that diversity is so important. Representation really matters. But how it played out in Star Wars isn't great. But we may agree or disagree on that. But and certainly we can both understand, and I think our audience will understand as well, that within the comic book realm, it's very normal. This is like what comic books are about. They are very political. They do have. I mean, I think I remember you, Omar, talking about Captain America and a story with him, which was very political.
Yeah, I mean, Captain America issue 1. The cover of it, it's a very famous cover, is Captain America punching Hitler in the face. This was months before the US actually joined World War II. This is before Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
So, like, please tell me how more political can you be? You have the All-Star Squadron in DC, which were the superheroes that actually went over to fight in the European theater of war. You've got the Invaders, which is when Captain America, Bucky, Namor, and the original Human Torch were all fighting in the war. These things have been happening. We've had very famously, after the towers fell in September the 11th, we had the call, which is when the superheroes were helping, with the aftermath of the falling of the towers. We had a comic book about that, where especially when it comes to the basic ethos around Marvel, it's always been about the world outside your window. It's always reflected what's happening in the real world. So, like to have that as your base ethos for the whole universe, and to say that that can't be political, that doesn't make any sense.
I hear what you're saying. It's a good argument as well. Okay, so there was a Green Lantern film.
Oh gosh, yes.
And you know this is coming. Ryan Reynolds. Now that film went down like the Titanic.
Yeah.
What did you think of that film, and why did it go down like the Titanic?
Well, I got a personal story with that. That's basically karma on my side.
Okay.
My younger brother is a massive Batman fan.
Yeah.
And the joy I had after watching Batman and Robin on how awful that was for his favorite character. So the karma came back when Green Lantern came out that bad.
Oh man.
Just completely just missed the point of what I think what made Green Lantern great. And it was very much a 90s film, even though it wasn't in the 90s. That's one of the things that I do take issue with DC, especially when it comes to design. Like one of the greatest superhero costumes ever is the Flash. Like it's simple, it just makes sense. And if you've seen in the New 52 era, which is anything like after 2011 till about now, well, it's starting to change now. They just over designed his costume, like, and they did that with the Green Lantern in the Green Lantern movie. Just over designed it, like it's a simple, iconic look. I feel also about that about Superman in the Zack Snyder films. Superman doesn't need armor; he's invincible.
Yeah.
Doesn't need armor. So those kind of things just don't make any sense. So yeah, that film was terrible. They brought in Hector Hammond, which was not a great kind of villain. They tried to bring in the whole parallax thing without any kind of context on what that actually means. It was just a poor film from the get-go, really.
Yeah. Okay, we're moving on swiftly from that film, which was Okay, there is talk that there will be a new Green Lantern film. I think DC are planning to reboot the franchise.
Yeah, they're trying to bring it back as the Green Lantern core, so we'll have all the characters.
Brilliant. That sounds exciting, actually. Do you think they'll do it as a movie or on HBO Max?
I would love them to do it on HBO Max as a limited series or as a series, because it's so that there's so many characters in the Green Lantern lore. There's so much that they can delve into. I think it would be a fantastic show to do.
Brilliant. And who do you think should play the next Green Lantern? Now, obviously, it depends on whether you're going for Hal Jordan or if you're going for a different Lantern sort of thing in that sort of respect, like a John Stewart. But who do you think for either?
Well, personally, I think if we're going to have a John Stewart, I'd absolutely love Idris Elba to be John Stewart. I think he would be a really good John Stewart. And for me, as I said, my favorite Green Lantern is Kyle Rayner. I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt would be an awesome Kyle Rayner.
Oh yeah, and obviously he was in the Christopher Nolan Batman film, wasn't he? He played Robin, didn't he? I think, or you don't really seem fully.
They try to Easter egg the whole Robin thing.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant! That's a good one, actually, and he's a very good actor as well. He's a very good actor. Okay, quick question then. Okay, because this is a great conversation. I hope you guys are at home listening and watching this on YouTube on the Christian Fandom Geek channel are getting a lot from this show. Are the Lanterns considered gods? Because I know we spoke about this before about the pantheon of the DC EU characters.
Yeah.
What are they considered? Are they considered new gods, old gods, or not even at all?
They're not considered as gods. Well, there are these elements, as I was saying about the kind of idea of different kind of lanterns. There are actual like kind of godlike characters that kind of come from that too. So with the Green Lantern, it's called the Ion, which is kind of almost godlike character. And then you have the Yellow Lantern, Parallax, which
he's a villain, isn't he?
He's a villain, but it's not really a villain. It's basically the embodiment of fear.
Right, okay.
Yeah, you could actually think of the Green Lanterns or the other lanterns as like elements like kind of like Infinity Stones.
Oh, you got in the Marvel
cinematic. In the Marvel kind of way. Each lantern being like an element of, you know, the emotions in that way. So they're not classed really as godlike, other than White Lantern, which is the embodiment of life.
Okay.
And your favorite one. Yeah, and basically when Kyle Reiner was, he was basically, he could do pretty much anything.
Okay. So I was going to ask you which lanterns are the most powerful, but you've already said that. So the White Lantern, as the most powerful one, what could he do?
Pretty much anything he wanted to. Basically, he had
rewrite reality, sort of thing. Was he on like Thanos level in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Pretty much, yeah. That's why he couldn't keep it, because he just couldn't contain all that power. And then you got Black Lantern, which is the complete opposite, which is as powerful, but is the yin to the yang, which is death.
So so they got the yin and yang thing going on there. And do they ever fight?
Yeah, well, the big storyline was called The Blackest Night, which basically meant that any dead character in the DC universe that was touched by the Black Lanterns would actually come back as a zombified version of themselves.
No, oh, whoa.
Yeah, so we had some very like famous deaths in DC universe that was kind of undone by the Blackest Night.
Yeah. Okay, and they have another version called the lightest or the brightest, or
then they have the brightest day, because it's basically a play on the Green Lantern oath.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so who are you've mentioned Parallax, so who are the sort of antagonists within the Lantern landscape?
Well, the main antagonist for the Green Lanterns will always be the Sinestro Corps.
Okay.
Which is the Yellow Lanterns, because the Green Lantern's weakness is yellow, the color yellow, and fear is the enemy of will. What is the thing? What is the thing that stops most of us doing something? Fear. So will is you know, the action of doing that. That's kind of why I really enjoy Green Lantern, because there's another level to it, because the power of the Green Lantern is to be as creative as possible. You can create any constructs you want to kind of accomplish what you need to do. So so basically the power of the Green Lantern is creativity and will, and to overcome fear. So the Yellow Lanterns is that fear. So that has always been kind of the main antagonist to the Green Lantern Corps.
Brilliant. Okay, quick last couple of questions on this special edition of the Lord Be With You podcast show, live stream edition, Christian Fandom Geek. Who would win in a fight between the Green Lantern and Superman?
Depends how much that Green Lantern believes that he can.
Yeah,
that's it. It's just sheer force of will.
Yeah,
that's how I see it. Is that, you know, if he thinks that he can do it more than Superman can,
then So that's a very Christian theme. You know, we talk about, like, obviously the channel's Christian Fandom Geek, and we do talk about stories from a Christian perspective as well. So that is a very Christian theme of kind of that belief and kind of achieving things, but the belief being fundamental to that.
Yeah, it's faith. The Green Lanterns can't use their powers for their own self-enrichment, or they cannot kill. You know, they have to use their power for good for it to actually work, and they have to use their belief in their own power for it to go forward. So yeah, there is a very much a level that you can actually look at it as a Christian thing, or an element of faith.
Okay, brilliant.
And they do adhere to the Book of Oa, which is a book of the universe where, you know, all their moral codes are come from too.
It's pretty much their Bible then, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, another really geeky fandom question. A Green Lantern versus Darth Vader.
Again, it's all about the faith. It's all about believing. If that Green Lantern wants to make a construct of a lightsaber, they can.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, you know, basically any construct, anything physical, they can actually build themselves. They've got power of flight. They've got shielding. They can. I think personally that it'd be a good fight, but I think a Green Lantern would win, especially someone like Hal Jordan, who is kind of like seen as one of the best.
Right. I'm like, you know, kind of putting these questions out there, so I'm kind of like not getting involved in that one. But every Star Wars fan who really is invested in Star Wars fan is going to be right now absolutely disagreeing with what you just said. I can imagine. I can think there'll be a lot of comments on the comment section of Christian Fandom Geek under this video, disagreeing with Vader beating, the Green Lantern beating Vader in a straight up super fight.
Well, the Green Lantern ring is seen as the most powerful weapon in the DC universe, one of the most powerful weapons in.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's universe level.
So a red lightsaber and the power of the Sith and Force and the dark side of the Force is no match for a Green Lantern ring.
No, well, unless they've got a yellow lightsaber, then we have issues.
Oh, Ray's got a yellow lightsaber at the end of the Rise of Skywalker. So maybe Ray. Oh, hang on a minute. We don't want to go on about Ray because there's going to be another conversation, another argument within the fandom there about her and that yellow lightsaber. Okay, brilliant. We've come to the end of our Green Lantern episode. Omar, awesome, absolutely fantastic. Once again, a guru of knowledge on the Green Lanterns and comic book lore. You've been absolutely brilliant.
Cheers, thanks.
We'll talk again very soon.
Cool.